Hi there, I'm Wendy and welcome to my channel where I share crochet tutorial videos for my projects and techniques. And in today's video I'm going to show you how I work corner to corner crochet, changing colours every 2 rows. I'll be using UK stitch terminology, and the only stitches that you need to know for this technique are how to make a chain, how to make a slip stitch and how to make the UK treble stitch. I'll also add the video start times in the description box below for how to start off your corner to corner, how to work the increasing rows and then how to work the decreasing rows, so that you can come back to this video at any time and go directly to the correct point. If you're new to my channel, then please take a moment to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you get to hear when my videos go live, and it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up with the like button as well. Today I'm using 2 different colours of UK weight double knitting yarn, and the yarn I'm using is Stylecraft Special DK, but you can use any yarn of your choice. And with that I've got a 4mm crochet hook. I'll be using 2 padlock style stitch markers, but if you don't have those you could just use a couple of pieces of yarn in a different colour. And you will need a pair of scissors just for snipping your ends, and when it's finished you'll want to have a wool type darning needle to darn in your ends as well. This is the left-handed video, so if you're right-handed I'm going to pop a link in above here now and in the description notes below to take you to the right-handed video. When it comes to working the corner to corner method, we're starting at a corner point here, and then we're working our rows diagonally until we reach the widest point, and then we start decreasing and finish our work in the opposite point to where we started. So if I actually turn my work diagonally, you can see it more clearly here that this is the starting point. We've worked our rows zigzagging up and down. This is the widest point, and then we've started decreasing our rows until we've finished at the top here. So I'm going to start by making this small corner here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is to make a slip knot and make 6 chain. Now you can make your slip knot in whichever is your preferred manner, and then we're just going to make our 6 chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And if we take a look at the chain, we've got the little slip knot at the beginning here that we don't count, and then we've got 6 V's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 underneath our crochet hook. Now I'm going to miss the first 3 chain that's under the hook, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then in the 4th, 5th and 6th chain leading back down to the slip knot, I'm going to work 1 treble in each chain, so that's 1 UK treble. So I'm missing this 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to make my first treble in the side of the 4th chain, and then I'm going to make my next treble in the 5th chain, and I'm going to work my last treble in that 6th chain leading back to the slip knot. And when I take a look at it now, I can see I can put my fingers between. I've got 1, 2, 3 trebles, and then I've got this 3 chain sitting at the side. Now I'm going to pop a stitch marker in that 3 chain space, and if you haven't got a stitch marker, just pop a little bit of yarn in a different colour, and that's going to be a marker for us for when we're working our next row. Now I'm going to repeat this process in exactly the same way again. I'm going to make 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And again I'm going to miss the first 3 chain under the hook, and then in the next 3 chain leading back to my work I'm going to work 1 treble in each chain. So that is 1, and then my second treble, and then my third treble. And again, if we take a look at it, we've got 1, 2, 3 trebles. I can put my fingers in between them, and then I've got this 3 chain sitting at the side. So again, in that 3 chain space, I'm going to pop a stitch marker. So when we take a look at it now, it looks like a little pair of trousers, and we've got 1 stitch marker hanging from the bottom of each leg. So I'm going to take the leg that's furthest away from my crochet hook and flip it upwards. And then where that stitch marker is, I'm going to pop my hook through, and I'm going to make 1 slip stitch to connect to that chain space. So now I can take my stitch marker out, and this 3 chain space that we have here, this is where we're going to work our next set of stitches. So I'm going to make 3 chain this time. So it's 1, 2 and 3, and in that same chain space where I am, I'm going to work 3 trebles. So it's 1 treble, and then my second treble, and then my third treble. So now when I take a look at my piece of work here and just pop this on top, you can see that I've made this corner piece. But now I just want to backtrack a moment, because I just want to undo this last treble that I made. So I'm going back to the point where I've made 2 trebles and I need to make my last one. And the reason that I've taken this stitch out is I just want to show you how to make a seamless colour change if you're changing colours like I am every 2 rows. So I'm going to make the first half of the treble stitch. So I'm going to take the yarn over the hook, pop the hook through that gap, yarn over the hook and pull it back through, and I've got 3 stitches on my hook. I'm then going to take the yarn over the hook and draw it back through the first 2. But before I finish off the stitch, I'm going to stop. And at this point, I'm going to cut my yarn, just leaving enough to darn in afterwards. And then I'm going to join in my new colour. So to do that, I'm just going to pop the yarn in the hook, allowing enough yarn to darn in afterwards, and draw it through to finish off my stitch. And then I can just pull both the short tail ends of the new and the old yarn, and that will just hold it in place. And we're ready now to start working our increasing rows. Now, whenever you're working an increasing row, you're always going to be ending one row and starting the next row in exactly the same manner. So we're going to be making 6 chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is exactly the same as how we originally first started off. We're going to miss the first 3 chain under the hook, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work 1 treble in each of the last 3 chain coming back to our work. So I'm going to make 1 treble, and then my second treble, and then my third treble, working back to my work. So in my new colour now, I've got my 1, 2, 3 trebles, and then if I pop my fingers between this gap here, I can see that I've got my 3 chain space at the side. When you're first learning to work the corner to corner method, it's always a good idea to pop a stitch marker between that 3 chain that you made here and the first treble, and that will help you keep the edges of your rows straight and show you where the end of each row will be. So now I'm ready to carry on with this row, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip my work up, and if I do that, I can see that I'm just in the right position to move to the next 3 chain space here, and I can just pop my hook through, yarn around the hook and make 1 slip stitch, and that has connected me now to the next area where I'm going to work. So I've now got this chain space here that I'm linked into, and I just want to make 3 chain. So that's 1, 2 and 3, and then I'm going to work 3 trebles into this chain space. So this is my first treble, my second treble, and my third treble. Now I'm ready to connect up to my next 3 chain space, and this is where my stitch marker is. So I know this is the last section that I'm going to be working in this row. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch into that chain space. And now I can take my stitch marker out. And again, I'm going to be working 3 chains, 1, 2 and 3, and then I'm going to work 3 trebles into this chain space. So that's my first treble, my second treble, and my third treble. Now I'm at the end of my row, and as this is an increasing row, I'm going to be working a 6 chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And just like before, I'm going to miss the first 3 chain under my hook. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to work a treble in each of the 4th, 5th and 6th chain, working back towards my work. So that's my first treble. And my second treble, and I'm just working into one side of the chain. And my third treble. And again, I'm going to take a look at it, and you can see that I've got 1, 2, 3 trebles here, and I've got this gap where I've got my 3 chains at the side, and this is my 3 chain space. So again, I'm going to pop a stitch marker in there, and that will tell me for the next row where the end section will be. So I'm just going to take my stitch marker and pop that in. So that's in there. And I very often find that my work is looking at me upside down, and I need to flip it back up to get my work into the right direction. So you might find that your work is naturally sitting this way, but if for any reason you're thinking, oh, I don't know where I'm going, and your work's hanging down, it's really simple. You just flip it back up, and then you look for that next chain space here, and that's where you're going to connect into with a slip stitch. So now I'm connected, and now I'm going to work 3 chain, 1, 2, 3 and 3 trebles into that 3 chain space. So that's my first, my second and my third. Now I literally just move along to the next chain space. It's at the side of the next set of 3 trebles, and I just connect into that chain space with a slip stitch, make 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and then work 3 trebles. So that's my first treble, my second treble, and my third treble. So I'm ready again to connect to the last set of 3 trebles here that's got the 3 chain space at the side. And because I have my stitch marker in this chain space, I know this is going to be the end of the row, and this is where I'm going to work my last set of 3 trebles and then start working an increase again. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch, make 3 chain, and then work 3 trebles. But this time when I get to the end of the row, I know that I want to change colour. So I've just worked my second treble here, and when I work my third treble, I'm going to make that colour change at the end of the stitch. So to do that again for you, I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and I'm going to start making the first half of my treble. So I've got 3 stitches on my hook, and I'm going to take the yarn round the hook and draw it back through the first 2. But before I finish off that stitch, now that I've got 2 stitches on my hook, I can cut my yarn and then take my new colour and just leave enough to darn in again afterwards, and pop the colour in the hook and draw it through both loops on the hook to finish off my stitch, and that gives me my seamless colour change again. So as we're at the end of the row and the beginning of the next row, and it's an increase, we're going to work that increasing section. So we're going to be making 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we missed the first 3 chain, and in the 4th, 5th and 6th chain, we're going to be working 1 treble in the side of each chain. So that's my first treble. My second treble. And my third treble. And if your tail is just a little bit loose, you can just pull the ends of both yarns just to pull them in and make them a little bit more secure. Then I'm going to look at this little section I made again, and I can see that I've got 1, 2, 3 trebles. I can pop my fingers between them. And then I've got this 3 chain space sitting at the side here. So I'm going to pop my stitch marker in there again, and that will help guide me as to where the end of the row is when I'm working my following row. So I'm going to just pop that one in there. And like I said before, whenever I'm working corner to corner, I always end up with my work looking at me upside down. So I just need to flip it up, and I can see now that my section that I've made is just ready to connect to this first yellow one. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch, and all the way along now till I get to the last section, I'm going to be making 3 chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then 3 trebles. 1, 2, and 3. And join with a slip stitch to the chain space at the side of the next 3 trebles. So that's 1, 2, 3, and there is my chain space. So I'm joining with my slip stitch and making 3 chain, and then 3 trebles in that chain space. So that's my first, my second, and my third. And then again, we're going to join to the 3 chain space at the side of the next 3 trebles. And then I'll join it with a slip stitch and work my 3 chain. And then I'll make my 3 trebles in that chain space. So that's my first, my second, and my third. So I'm back again at this last chain space where my stitch marker is. So I know this is the last little section of my row that I'm going to be working. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch, make my 3 chain, and then work my last 3 trebles, and I can take my stitch marker out. So now I've got this far, I'm going to start working some decreases and start working back down to a point again. But you can of course carry on with the increasing rows until you've reached the size square that you want, and then come back to the video to start the decreasing rows. So I've now reached the widest point of my work, and I'm going to start decreasing my rows, bringing them back down to a point diagonally at the opposite corner to where I started. So I'm just going to quite simply flip my work around, and I'm going to make a slip stitch into each of those 3 trebles that I just made. So that's 1, 2 and 3. And that's just move my yarn back along to this 3 chain space at the side here. So I'm going to make a slip stitch into that chain space. And now I'm ready to just work my 3 chain and 3 trebles as normal. So I'm just going to make 1, 2, 3 chains and then 3 trebles. That's my first, that's my second, and that's my third. And then if I just lay this down to show you, you can see that my work has now squared off at the top, and it will all come into shape as I continue. So again, I'm going to pop a stitch marker in that 3 chain space that I made at the beginning of the row, just so that I know where the end of the next row is going to be, and I can continue along the row in exactly the same manner as we've been doing before. So I'm working along in these steps, working into these 3 chain spaces at the sides of the 3 trebles. So I'm joining with my slip stitch, making my 3 chain, and then working my 3 trebles. So again, that's my first, my second, and my third. And then I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the next 3 chain space after the next set of 3 trebles. And then again, my 3 chain, my 3 trebles, and that is my second, and that is my third. And then I'm going to join with a slip stitch again to make my next set. So I've joined into that chain space just after that next set of 3 trebles, and it's 1 chain, 2 chains, 3 chains, and now my next 3 trebles. So that's my first and my second and my third. Now I've reached the last 3 chain space where my stitch marker is, but this time I'm decreasing and I'm making my row shorter. So all I need to do is to make a slip stitch into that 3 chain space, and then I can take my stitch marker out, and then I turn my work straight away, and I'm going to work into these 3 trebles, making a slip stitch, taking me back to this chain space at the side. So I'm going to make my first slip stitch and my second slip stitch and my third slip stitch. Now I'm ready to change colour again because I've worked 2 rows in the lavender and I'm going back to the yellow. So before I make the slip stitch into the 3 chain space, I'm going to cut my yarn and change my colour at this point to give me a seamless colour change again. So I'm just going to start to make my slip stitch and pop my new colour in the hook and pull that through. and that will have my yellow yarn ready to start working. And I'll just pull these two tail ends just a little bit, just give them a little tug just to tighten it all up. And now I'm going to work 3 chain. So it's 1, 2 and 3. Pull that yellow yarn again just to tighten it up a little bit. And then I can make my 3 trebles into that chain space. So that's my first, my second, and my third. And I'm going to pop that stitch marker back into that 3 chain space that we made again, so that when it comes to the next row, I will know exactly where I'm finishing. So pop that in like that. And then again, it's forming a pattern now. We join into the 3 chain space after the next 3 trebles, and we join in with a slip stitch. And then we're making 3 chain, and then 3 trebles. And then again, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the next 3 chain space and make 3 chains again, and then 3 trebles. And that's my second, and that's my third, and I'm back again to where I'd popped the stitch marker. And you can see now how handy it is to have the stitch markers, because they really help you to keep your rows in check and see exactly where to finish your rows. So again, I'm going to take my stitch marker out now and just make my slip stitch in that 3 chain space, and I don't need to do anything else more than turn my work. Now I can work a slip stitch into each of these 3 trebles. So again, so that's 1, 2 and 3, and that was going through both sides of the stitch. And then I'm going to make a slip stitch into that 3 chain space, and I'm all ready to start my next row. So I'm going to make my 3 chain, and then my 3 trebles. And then pop my stitch marker back into that 3 chain space that we made at the beginning of the row. And then I can join to the 3 chain space after the next 3 trebles, and then I can make my 3 chain and make my 3 trebles. And I'm back to the stitch marker again, so I'm just going to make a slip stitch into that 3 chain space and take out that stitch marker. And I'm just ready to turn and work 3 slip stitches along those 3 trebles. Now I'm at my very corner point now, but I need to change my yarn. So before I work the slip stitch into that 3 chain space at the side here, I'm just going to cut my yarn and join in my new colour when I make the slip stitch. So I'm just going to pop the hook through, new yarn in the hook, and pull it all the way through and make that slip stitch. Just give those little ends a tug. And now I can make my final corner. So I'm going to make my 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and make my final 3 trebles here. So that's my first treble, my second treble, and my third and last treble. And now all we need to do is make one final slip stitch in the 3 chain space where our stitch marker is. And we can finish off. And our corner to corner crochet is complete. So if we take it out and have a look at it now, this is the little sample that we've worked on. And you can see that we started at this point here and we increased out to our widest point, and then we came back to our final point afterwards. And all we need to do now is to darn in our ends, and your corner to corner is complete. So that's my method for working corner to corner crochet, changing colours every 2 rows. And I really hope you've enjoyed it, as I love working corner to corner crochet myself. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to get notified of when my tutorials go live. And I look forward to seeing you next time.